the forces that hold the universe together had chosen a new path for me. They had begun to pick at the fabric of my life, and it was unravelling with shocking rapidity. Something I did not understand had ordained that I should notice what I had by taking it away. Up until now, I had never had cause to think too deeply about my life, and had moved without said thought seamlessly from the schoolyard to the workplace. It is said that adversity motivates people, but I had never known any real adversity, and so my motivation had been born out of an innate sense of purpose rather than survival of the fittest. Some time ago I had read that if you ignore the signs life shows you, it simply gets louder. Eventually you have to take notice. Well, life had my attention, but I was at a loss as to what it wanted. I could only keep asking questions and hope that the answer, if it came, would make sense to me. I had taken a bus to meet an ex-colleague, Peter. He still worked for the ad agency in human resources. I had been let go 2 months earlier. My intention was to ask a favour, but beneath this was a naive optimism that with the right questions, enlightening answers may come. I wanted to know how I was chosen as one of the people that had to go. On reflection, and I had been doing a lot of that recently, it couldn't just be the Benson's fiasco. Maddox survived that, so why not me? I was a good account director. I had never been sacked before, so why now? I was one of the good guys. This shouldn't be happening. The bus was making annoyingly slow progress. It moved through the gridlock streets in small bursts, never more than a few yards at a time. I looked at my watch. I was going to be late. I tried to decide whether it would be better to get off and walk, but outside it had started to rain heavily. I felt anxious with all the decisions that were being demanded of me lately, even the small ones. It was as if an invisible force was piling problems onto me, trying to break me. Why me? A young woman got up from her seat and walked down the aisle past me. She fumbled with her umbrella whilst mumbling breathy insults at the worsening rain. She caught my ear with the end of the umbrella. I looked daggers at her, even though her eyes only apologized. As she moved away, I felt suddenly sick, then intolerably sad. A taxi in front of the bus progressed a few feet, billowing a cloud of black smoke into the air. The long line of vehicles inched forwards behind it. I watched as the black plume from the taxi started to dissipate slowly, and I imagined the tons of climate-warming CO2 drifting up from our metal conga in an almost invisible cloud. Things that destroy life are not always obvious. The vehicle slowed and came to rest next to a bus stop in deepest Holborn, just a short walk away from the wine bar Annie's Place, where I was to meet Peter. I got off the bus and hesitated before crossing the road. I wasn't looking forward to the meeting. I had never actually talked to Peter before. We had worked in the same office for many years, but had only exchanged colleague speak rather than actual conversation. I realized I knew nothing about him other than he liked corned beef and pickle sandwiches, drank Diet Coke and had a thing for a girl in filing. I pushed the door open and entered the wine bar. Although I had been there many times before, this time I felt like a stranger. Peter was already there, drinking Coke and about to bite into a sandwich. "Peter, hi!" I called to him. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, looking at his watch. "Sorry, the bus took ages." A bar ran the length of the room and was full of young advertising executives. This was the current place for ad people to be seen, and they were all working hard at being visible. The top of the bar was highly polished chrome. Equally shiny stools with black leather seats were screwed at regular intervals. Peter sat on one of these. Everything seemed sterile, shiny, and devoid of honest human emotion. The wine bar had probably replaced an ancient London pub, obliterating forever the history written on the chipped, beer-stained tables that had once filled this space. I sat down next to Peter. He patted me on the back like we were old friends. My body tensed. I don't like unnecessary formality, but unwarranted familiarity as a cover for social nerves, I find even worse. A simple handshake would have worked, and more to the point, would have avoided the smear of pickle he left on the side of my jacket. "What are you drinking?" he asked. "I guess that's Diet Coke," I said, pointing at his glass. "Yes," he said. "What are you, clairvoyant?" "Yeah, something like that. I'll have the same." A young barmaid nodded and started to open a bottle of Coke. "So, what's it like to be a layabout?" said Peter, with a crass smile. For a moment I thought he was going to pat me on the back again. "Not as good as you seem to think. Really, I'd rather be working." "Bollocks! You've got your redundancy. Now you can twiddle your thumbs for a bit while you work out what you're going to do." "Believe me, thumb twiddling's not all it's cracked up to be. A twiddle or two and it becomes very repetitious." "Oh," he said, and looked rather disappointed. "So not that great then?" "Sorry, no. Quite boring, really." Peter looked let down by my answer. Maybe working in advertising he rarely contemplates the truth. The barmaid placed my Diet Coke in front of me. £4.50, she said. £4.50? I echoed in a surprised falsetto. "It's a wine bar," she replied blandly, by way of explanation. "Yeah, but this is Coke, not wine. My treat, mate," Peter said as he slid a fiver across the polished bar. Now I felt cheap as well as cheated. "No, I can afford it, I just don't want to." "How can they justify that sort of price?" "You forget quickly, don't you? You can charge whatever people will pay, and most people will pay £4.50 for a Coke in a wine bar." I took a sip of expensive Coke. "How's that lovely wife of yours?" Peter asked. "We broke up 2 months ago," I answered, without feeling the need to mitigate his faux pas. "Oh yeah," he said, as if he were remembering my situation, but we both knew his knowledge of my life was very sketchy. "So what can I do for you?" he said, changing the subject. "Well," I paused, suddenly feeling breathless. You know lots of people in the industry. I wondered if you could put in a word for me with someone." "Ah," he said, looking upwards into space. "Things are pretty tough at the moment." "Yes, I know. I got fired." "Yeah, well, that's it. Everyone's downsizing." "But lots of people still have their jobs," I argued. He was still contemplating the ceiling as if a list of advertising jobs was about to be posted there. "Why was I given the push?" I demanded. Peter could no longer avoid lowering his gaze. He looked at his glass and rattled the ice cubes. "Well, it had to be someone." "Yes, that's obvious, but why me? What made me dispensable?" "I don't know." He looked at me, then dropped his eyes back to his glass. "If I knew something, I'll tell you." "I can hear it in your voice, Peter. You do know something." "Look, I need help here. Please." He gave his glass a final shake. The ice cubes clinked one last time. Then he looked up at me. "There are some people who are very hungry, willing to do whatever it takes. Then there are others who are, well, dependable," he said. "Dependable?" I repeated. "Yeah," Peter said. "I think they see you as a bit of a, well, oh God, how do I say this? A bit of a plodder." "A plodder?" "Not very ambitious. You've got to admit you're not very ambitious." So that's it, I'm not greedy enough for them. No! Peter's tone had become conciliatory, like a man breaking up with his girlfriend. It's not about greed, it's about hunger. Sorry, explain to me how hunger has nothing to do with greed. No, you're making it sound stupid. It is stupid. No, it's not. It's reality, Simon. Advertising is a ruthless game. I think they think you're too nice. They've trimmed the soft edges. Until you can show you've toughened up, you're not going to get anywhere. I see, I said. So you can't put in a word for me anywhere? No, sorry. Not really, mate, he apologised, sporting an awkward grin. Mate, I thought. It's interesting the way people think they can avoid personal attack by feigning friendship. I felt like crying. The world had braced itself against the economic wind, and I was to be left outside, unwanted, not tough enough to be useful. I didn't know what I was going to do. Then it hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd done what every young person fears. I'd arrived at the age of 50 and suddenly noticed that I am nowhere I wanted to be. I had nothing I wanted to have. And I was old. Not old as in old age, but old as in not young. I had more history than future. As I left the wine bar, the number of questions that rattled uncomfortably in my skull had increased. How could I lack ambition and yet get so far? You don't hold down a job for nearly 35 years across 4 different agencies without having something worthwhile. I had thought life was merely a process of following a simple path. I never suspected that there were going to be side roads, steep hills and junctions without signposts. What I wanted, what I needed, was unbiased feedback from someone who could tell me if Peter's assessment was right. There was only one person I could depend on telling me the truth. She owed me at least that much. I needed to talk to my wife.